Let me tell you something about our fathers. In fact, let me start by saying this. I was sharing that I spent some time with my mentor over the weekend. See, my mentor's father was a priest. My mentor is also a preacher. My mentor's father wrote a thesis on Ifa. He's a proper reverend gentleman. I mean, he's late now. He was a proper gentleman. And we were talking about our deities. And it was like, you get it. One of the things that actually gladdens my heart is when elders, professors, tell you get it. And we also talk about some people who think that we're trying to do something like untoward, not understand the fact that some people that have pushed this thing up, written about it, have mostly been people who looked at it beyond spirituality. Not to say that, I mean, if I'm a Christian, if I'm talking church, is different. But if we're talking Yoruba, we can talk about the philosophy of Yoruba. I know one funny thing that he said, actually, I started laughing. I was like, this happened to me too. He said the Babalawo saw him and he said something. The Babalawo said, that thing belongs to them. He now said to the Babalawo that, no, it belongs to us. You just own the spiritual aspect of it. I was like, this same thing happened to me. And that was my exact same response. We lose out on these things because all we see, and when I say we, I mean all of us, whether you are the traditional person or you are the Christian or Muslim, when you focus on the spirituality, you will miss out on the larger part of what they are talking about is actually beyond what you think they are saying. It's bigger. The tradition, the culture, the philosophy, the wisdom that is encoded is bigger than the spirituality. As we go on, we're going to talk about this, but let me say this. The reason I talk about because see, our fathers, our ancestors knew that the Orishas were humans. They knew. Do you know that, I won't go deep into it today, but do you know that the Orishas, even the ones who had frailties, who made mistakes, their frailties were included in the taboos as deities. Oh boy, I don't know. I'll find a way to explain. I don't want to go, but we'll have another session on this. I'm stopping myself because I don't want to go outside this whole Ibadan. Sorry, if Allah thing. I already said that, so I must finish it. So let me finish it this way. How many of you know Obatala? Please, in the comment section, you can just type if you do. If you don't, please tell me you don't. If you do, then my work is not as much. Àwọn ambisha mo entonje Obatala. Ìgbà mi àwọn kan máa pè Obatala ní Òrìṣà ńlá. Is a very important deity. But you see, Yoruba elders are brilliant. Their relationship with, let me tell you something. Before the British, Yoruba's relationship with the Òrìṣà was not spiritual. Or let me put it this way, it was not exclusively spiritual. They didn't see them as gods. The word gods did not exist in the lexicon or in the way they looked at the deities. It was more like heroes. Like you have patron saints in the Roman Catholic Church. That's how they saw them. They respected them, they paid obeisance to them, but they were seen as, and I'm using the word that is closest. Oshimale, yes, I'm going to go there. They looked at, I'm not saying they were patron saints, I'm saying what you can use to understand, or the best way to understand who they were to us, was not as deities. The reason I use deities and gods these days because that's what we all now understand. But the reason we call them that was because when Europeans got to us, they looked at us the way they were before Christianity. They were pagans and they had gods, and many of them. When they looked at us and saw us with many of these, Orishas, they said, this must be their gods. And the way we related with them, made them think that it was the same concept. It's not the same concept. The closest thing to it really is what you would call like patron saints. Like you would call St. Patrick's for St. Patrick's Day, for instance, for the Irish. That's how our Òrìṣà really are. That's actually what they are, to a large extent. Not totally, but to a large extent. The way you have the patron saint of a guild, that's what Ogun is. Is the patron saint of metal workers. Why? Because it was the most important. Before him, there was nobody that was as important in metallurgy than him. And so he became the patron saint of those who work with irin. So tó bá jẹ́ alágbẹ̀dẹ, tó bá jẹ́ ọdẹ, tó bá ń ṣe nǹkan tó ní ṣe pẹ̀lú irin. Meanwhile, irin to us ó ti pẹ́. You know, for the whites, they had the Stone Age, then they had the Bronze Age, then they got to the Iron Age. For us, we went from the Stone Age straight to the Iron Age. We didn't have the bronze brick. By the way, everything I'm saying right now, guys, I'm not making anything up. I can tell you this. Let me even tell you now. You can read what I just said right now. Two sources: History of Yoruba People by Banji Akintoye and Yoruba: The New History by Akinwumi Ogundiran. The speed that she grow, akọrin ká tó kan ṣé bàbá náà pé bronze bóyá bàbá bí dẹ akọrin ká tó kan. Now, when they call him Oshimole, and again, with all due respect to those who see this from a spiritual or religious perspective, you are. I'm going to. Okay, I was going to say something about Obatala. I'll come back to Oshimole, please. I asked a question about Obatala earlier, and I said, Sharonti, thank you. Sharonti Obatala. There is something that those who follow Obatala, I want to start using the word follow because I think it's better. Not again, please, if you relate with this concept as a religious person, this is not me. I'm not having a religious conversation. How come we now have bronze sculpture? Because bronze came eventually. Bronze came eventually. So understand what I said, Bronze Age. So human history is divided into different epochs or eras. There was an era that you call Stone Age, where your tools were, I'm sorry, I'm saying a lot of things because people are asking questions, where the tools that people use were made of stone. So you have flint stones. You want to cut, use a stone. You have to sharpen the stone because that's what you could pick on the surface. In order to get to the other minerals, you have to dig. You can't get iron on the surface. So the first man would not have been able to access iron or iron, iron, bronze. The first set of men would not have been able to access those things. The first set of men would have found stones around them. They would have found rocks and hills and mountains. They would have found rocks and stones and found a way to sharpen them if they want to, maybe to cut something. You know, everything you use metal for, they use stone for essentially back in the day, right? And then for Yoruba, for instance, if you read Akintoye's book, for Yoruba, for instance, our discovery of iron was related to our work in pottery, which was majorly what the women did in trying to find the kind of raw materials they needed. At some point, and again, it's not today's topic, at some point, they found a way to use heat or to generate heat to a particular point where you can be able to extract iron from the core of the earth. That happened. So the point is not that we don't have bronze, is that we had iron before bronze. But for Oyinbo, they had bronze. For instance, they had Ice Age. We don't have Ice Age, or we didn't have Ice Age. Okay, different, but they had Stone Age, and then they had Bronze Age, and then they had Iron Age. We had Stone Age, and we went straight to iron. But let me finish with Obatala. I'm going to go back to this iron thing very soon. Followers of Obatala have a taboo. There's something they don't do. again, if you discuss this thing from a spiritual perspective or religious perspective, I understand you, but that's not what today's conversation is about. It's not that. OJ, no. They did not demonize them. Again, see, a lot of you just say things that because you think that's what happened. That's not what happened. They call them gods and deities. Nobody's here, so I depend on you in the comment section. But please, let's not just write things. Early 1900s was actually when things became better. That was the time when Yoruba Christians chose to be Christians and remain Yoruba by changing everything that was European and Western to their own cultural understanding. You can't speak for them. I can speak for them. I've studied this thing. I've spent more than 20 years doing this. What do you mean I can't speak for them? I know I'm on TikTok, but people of God, I think I've studied it, I've researched it, I've visited shrines, I've been to these places. Why do you think the African Church started in 1901? What do you think Fela's grandfather was doing? What do you think Mojola Agbebi was doing? What was enrich doing, studying Ifa? What do you think Bolaji Do was doing and Reverend Adebola? What do you think these people were doing on the matters of Ifa, especially, and understanding Yoruba deities? You know, there's something that I think we do a lot in our age. We think we're the first set of people to come up with this thing. We are not. The first set of people started talking about it in the late 19th century, and they had a breakthrough in the early 1900s, specifically 1901. We think we are very smart. I mean, I know we are smart, but in reality, if you compare us with our forebears, you'll be humble. You will be humble. If I show you books by Bolaji Dowu, if I show you E.M. Lijadu was a reverend who wrote on Ifa, the first one, the first indigenous person that wrote on Ifa, and the first thesis, PhD thesis in England on Ifa was also written by an indigenous person, was also written by a priest, a Christian priest. Why were they doing that? They were rediscovering their culture regardless of their religion. It is not a true thing. One of these, I'll talk about it. And what Ajekara actually did and what they are saying he did that he did not do. Don't worry, we'll come back to this later. I just want to advise all of us, right? No matter what you think you know, please, when the time comes to talk about this Yoruba traditional kinikini, I will go deep into it. I'll just advise that all of us should please take time to study what actually happened, what our forebears did on every side. Study it. They were wise. And I dare say they were wiser than us. They were wiser than us. The mistake of the youth is thinking that he's the first to hit on an idea. Which is why everybody goes to the extreme, because they're not building on anything. The mistakes, so let's say, for instance, there were some people back in the day who also went to the extreme and then they came back later. So what our generation should do is, okay, so they went through the extreme, then they came back middle of the clinical. So we'll try to build, if it's not there, it'll be Latima better, but our own better, our malo better from the beginning. Who will do extreme, will get angry, who will do something wrong, will now find the way when we are like 50 or 60. Then with our bad day, our mama to one day, and that's why no. They now go back. So the point is 3 generations repeating the exact same process. We are not building on it. It's sad. Oh boy, when it comes to this matter, it gets me very passionate because that's actually what I'm very, very passionate about. The evolution of Yoruba land, of Yoruba thoughts, Yoruba philosophy beyond just spiritual or blame games. I'm not sure. Have you ever really studied what really happened? But again, we're going to talk about that later. Obatala. In our cosmology, in our myth of origin, so let me put it this way, there are 3 things going on. Number 1 is the humanity of the person. That person had certain frailties. All of us have frailties. Kò sí nǹkan bí tó pé tán. Ọlọ́run ló ń ṣọ́gbà, Ọlọ́run ràn gbà lọ́wọ́. Gbogbo tí ó bá jẹ́ gbogbo tó bá ibi tí kùdìẹ̀kùdìẹ̀ bá wà ní ayé wa k'Ọlọ́run ràn wá lọ́wọ́. Everybody has something that, you know, or maybe you have done it or you are better now. Praise God. So, as a human being, he had human frailty. When Yoruba people decided to deify him, they did not excuse his frailty. Do you know what they did? They included his frailty in our myth as a deity. They then used that frailty as the basis for a taboo for his followers. If you follow Batala, you don't drink. There's a reason for that. Whatever human issue he had, in our myth of origin, there's a reason they said he did something, then Oduduwa had to now come from Olodumare. That story, they were telling you something that is based on what they were as humans. But again, is deep. What I'm saying basically is that in Yoruba idea of deity, using that word Òrìṣà, it is not to create a clean image. It is to take him warts and all and say, this is who we have, this is our own, this is what he did right, this is what he did maybe not very cool, but guess what we're going to do? We're going to learn from his errors and make it better. Therefore, what they are doing is they are learning from his humanity before they're talking about his divinity. What we look at today is just a divinity. Therefore, we're not able to learn anything. For instance, if I mention Oromiyan, what comes to your mind? But Oromiyan was a soldier. He was a warrior. He was a city builder. But what do you think about? You think of the Okpa in Ife, which is, I mean, that's the religious part. But the man, you cannot learn anything from the Okpa now. And I'm not saying the Okpa is not important. The Okpa is important as a memorial. Memorial. That's a memorial. See, let me tell you why they put these things up. Maybe we should also help our generation. These people did not put those things up for worship originally. I mean, for the rest of the people, that's what it would mean. But it's actually, the idea really is this. See, if you go to Ife, there's a mausoleum for Obaderemi. When you go there, you know that Obaderemi was here. What do you then do? You ask questions about the person. So when you go to Ife and you see the Okpa, you're like, Kilo Okpa, what does it represent? That's a memorial. That reminds you of who he was. So when you see the Okpa, the next thing that the Agbalagbas expect you to ask is that who is this Tana Forikini so? Your question will then get them to tell you his story. His story will then inspire you to do better in your generation. That is how we keep it going. But once we get to the Okpa, when you get to the Okpa, all you see is Ambo. And I'm not saying Mabo. It's like when you go to Olumo. When you get to Olumo Rock, I'll come Bo, okay, Abi? I'll come Olumo. What did the government of Ogun State do with Olumo? To create more people to worship? No. To make it a tourist site. When you get there and you see the hills, what do you ask? Why is it so important to us? Then you hear the story of Abeokuta. You hear about the war. You hear about Shodeke. You hear about how Shodeke, two people from Egbaoko, how they took the arcade, the Okeono and the Bagura, how they got there, his connection with the Owu, how they settled that place. What are you doing right now? You are using an object, right, to learn the history. You begin to now adore them like, they did that when they were fighting 2 weeks ago. They opened Olumo Rock. It's now free until September. The crowd that went to Olumo Rock last week, the place was packed out. People were complaining that people were too many. They just stayed in the car. I know somebody who traveled from another city, another state, about 2 weeks ago, to go to Olumo Rock. So just marvel. But you see, what we are doing, we have to be careful so that we don't devolve. People had conversations a while back, and I was there, and I said to them, listen, back in the day, our forebears, they will look at a hill that is so huge and be like, Elelo Toi, Adebo. They look at Odo. Àrédìí òkun, àrédìí ọ̀sà. Báwo ló ṣe tó yìí? Wọ́n á bọ́. Ẹ máa rí igi inú igbó kìjikìji, igi tó tóbi tẹ́ẹ̀lì tí apá ọ̀ka àwọn kan tó wá pé apá ọ̀ka gi. Ẹ máa rí wá pé ẹ máa bọ́. Igi ọ̀pẹ and so on and so forth. Now, they now evolved to the point where they looked at the functionality of what they are seeing. So, for instance, when they saw the Olumo rock, it wasn't about worship, it was about refuge. There's a functionality of that thing. After the thing has saved them, they then decided to worship that thing. But they rediscovered it and said, look, you know what, this is a tourist site. That is what everything is. There is a spiritual part of it. For those who want to worship it, is fine. I mean, I'm a Christian. I will say it's not fine because I want you to be a Christian. But I'm saying from a cultural perspective, it's okay. But I'm saying beyond that, there's something more. And even in that, we don't even hide the flaws of our heroes.